Hello, Americans. Nature gives us means to discern, to answer things, to know things, understand things. But we have been using systems other than its own. For example, it's a mistake to use the phrase deep state, which has um, Watergate and news coverage and subject treatments, relativity, where a breaching method showed the country's A through Z how to make subject treatments and how to make principles treatments. It showed the names of American history experts, how to self value defenses of, in other words, how to change, how to self value roles with what they don't self value at the same time, which is changing what James Madison communicated to us. Why and how our founders had to leave things declassified for us to understand critically, like how and why no one had free speech, how and why James Madison is the only founder that we're allowed to know the name of, that had the security to allow us to know the name of. No one had free speech. Slavery rules even had been sustained, and then America's founders were born. It was already sustained southern colonies and northern colonies. That's obfuscated for known reasons, but those known reasons were propagated, self-cultivated, and our roles, needs, natures, and sensing for the breaching method. Anybody adapting to it with syntax and or with nature proper. You know how long ago we could have made the Constitution unabridged? Therefore, America great again. This is one of the best ways to make America great again. By the way, I noted when there were still no worms in my soil at all. Totally opposite how it used to be. I was noting about that and how we can make America great again. Because in other words, the soil needs to be all proofs of it. That it needs to be fed too, regardless if it's not saying that it doesn't have to say the soil is alive, but it's like it's alive because it's all made up of things, but then it dies. Nature communicates with us about positive and negative and about difference, therefore names. Tactical terror, as a system tactical terror, then we're allowed to appreciate syntactically, not by accident. Our founders communicated for us to explain how the private criminal enterprises had time collusions with the three ways manifest: torture, extortion, factory nature, slavery, therefore physical slavery method. And also three ways manifest: identity, theft, fraud, slander. This is an identity racketeering method worse than war crimes, that which reassign what nature communicates. With black people as white survives when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness. There is no excuse to have other communicated than our founders communicated about this, including how they declassified for us to understand why, how not one person had free speech. James Madison's plan, they had to counter extort and force people to an extent of unity. Everyone still had to have roles with crazy laws and private industry, overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, as an extent of syntactical collusion / us against themselves and against everyone else to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sensed. And that individually grouped in together. The voicings of individuals, of groups, and of, humanity. A through Z, the styles, whether they like each other or not. The humanity voices have been systems tactically don't leave out how we're in a different species body than other different species bodies. And each of the different species individual bodies is made up of a whole bunch of different individual bodies. We are being shown the individual identity of value progression. That just like your identity, the parts of your body have the parts of your body, has the parts of your body with a semi-nature relationship to it. Everyone's identity individually, then further grouped and further simultaneously / hyper simultaneously and or progressively. Nature is showing us how it is making more of its identity of forever nature through temporary / lasting space nature. And there are also proofs of things inherent to, active to, and progressive to. The quality aspects of fact-sheeping nature. Fact-sheeping nature itself, when people deny things. So we have to be able to appreciate the hyper-evidential. Little kids would have lifted America, made America great again. Little kids had the means, let alone little kids, let alone adults. We have the means. We have means declassified for us to, but we have to be able to appreciate how this hyper-foreign breaching method that was non-distinctly too. It was simply distinctly entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13. And rules of the crazy laws against Native American against Native difference too. Because nature, now we can't speak about nature as hyper-native pure. Now Native Americans and regular citizens are forced to respect, their culture and the nature's debate regarding it, which is our culture. See President / Chief. There are proofs that Native Americans were part of the plural founders that we don't know the names of, any of them specifically. And we were directed to understand their plan as James Madison. And then George Washington, we're supposed to understand how he was involved with that plan. He said he agreed to use that plan, and they counter-extorted at key locations. Inside, again, more than 13 colonies, in northern colonies and southern colonies. That's why they had to leave slavery entrenched, for example. There were internationally monitored conversations over work, criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, and way worse, using that to hide behind and through. The difference of guilt of that, the witch trials courts, even if it was made up, that was the value of the courts. There were crazy laws against Native American human difference and against Native human difference and against every human difference. We have the same colorized and different colorized at the same time, and there are exceptions. Again, we are a different species body. And all the species bodies, all the different species bodies are each one made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. We are shown the individual identity of value / value progression that is and has been generating all group differences. But it also shows us if we use it for systems other to appreciate it syntactically, therefore physically, it shows us with finite, individual, grouped, and simultaneous demonstrations, negative value nature progressions, acts and natures, a different nature of value attached like to all the physical values of your body and to your complete identity that they have a semi-nature relationship to. We all have a semi-nature relationship to that identity of value / value progression that is generating the species bodies, that is generating why about difference. We have the same colorized, different colorized, different color species. It is showing us the difference of its body. Also a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. And English was revealed to teach this. Nature shows us that it is functional, being a hyper-invisible but still discernible, distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. In fact, indistinctly from how, in other words, it is invisible but still discernible / hyper-invisible but still discernible. And this is what English was revealed to teach and how it was revealed to be taught. The parts of speech of English grammar about the invisible but still discernible, such as the subject, we could discern with discernment of how we could only appreciate subjects individually grouped and simultaneous to an extent. It comes also with an extent to know and to understand, and simultaneously why we don't understand it and why and how we don't understand it. That there is what is greater than and more finite than, and with active relativity to what is simultaneous as a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Again, that distinct identity of simultaneous nature shown to us other ways. Again, by being able to discern the other species' bodies. How and why a breaching method. In other words, so there are means for regular people to be able to discern. Forgiveness, because we have means to discern. If everyone appreciated forgiveness, in fact, achieving nature on paper properly, it would have brought up the hyperforeign breaching method anyway. That which nature communicates to us, and our founders did too. But our founders' communications are replaced. There are styles, needs, and natures that a breaching method shows how to pretend other. Like, for example, by self-valuing collusion /S with this breaching method having been at all locations /S in ways that no one understood, no one wanted, no one wants. It wants and needs that self-value, truth used for lies, for the breaching method, for the hyperforeign breaching method that uses self-defended syntax individual of the groups of countries and of all humanity voicings and defenses of them, sense and sensibilities by them, to use Jane Austen's phrase. Not just leaving out and valuing having been left out, the breaching method. The breaching method that we could also agree to call additionally a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise without having to claim, without having to assign guilt. They have been doing that, for example, in other words, the courts never stopped having guilt with all natures of crime scenes, with all kinds of readings of statutes and precedents as the breaching method showed them how to do their jobs. It's a job. It's just a job. It's not nothing just a job. At countries A through Z, the Constitution is abridged. The Constitution, its equivalent value. The human fact treatment nature sciences, syntax, and syntax nature is abridged. Nature is showing us that criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, indifferences treatments. Oh, I don't even like that person, or the opposite too. Because this is a breaching method getting over not just on the simultaneous, but that which is hyper simultaneous. That distinct identity of relativity /hyper relativity. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. We have relativity projected to us /hyper relativity projected to us this way. This is where reason and logic has syntax proper. This breaching method showed people to pretend that relativity has to do with math. And they have people, they have styles, needs, natures of debate that can't get away with defending that because nature showing itself shows other without self-valuing. Criminally foreign influence fact treatment nature quality aspects in nature, having been standing from off the locations of campuses of all ages and natures, and relative crime scenes, parks, town offices, community centers, ground exceptions, like things with people's descriptions. There's a breaching method here that there's only 3 branches of government at modern countries A through Z. A breaching method figured out that only locations, areas, and states' voices could operate the phenomenon of the names of the countries as the human species body volume science. And there are proofs that it was going to get caught for being a transnational criminal enterprise. So what it did was make itself a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise without anyone realizing, by making them self-value roles with the process of that. In other words, there are proofs that a transnational crime group knew it was going to get caught and had collusions with the 3 branches of government in more than one country. And there are proofs of intercultural, and they knew they were going to get caught in both their countries. And so they exploited that by doing things to make problems that would keep what they realized was going to get them caught from being discovered. And so they hurt people, persuaded them, and sustained things upon them to get them to respond wrongly and to defend that, and to have the people who it was wrongly, hurt through them, who were rightly trying to defend themselves when they don't know how to do it. They're just trying to do it. They had to do it. So then those people have to counter that. And everyone's leaving out the breaching method. And also what all sides were missing except for the breaching method, the more and more such would be entertained. If force, trick, hurt, and persuade them without realizing, more and more they would self-value alteration of what human syntax would be. Conviction nature, with logic, with reason, let alone with convictions, let alone convictions with guilt assignments. While breaching method needs that. And to keep that things that depended in the past, and the difference of properly or improperly too. Discussions about that, subject treatments, a measured and maintained tool by hyper sophistication. Right through administrations, right through the Obama administration, the Trump administration, the Biden administration, the Clinton administration, the Reagan administration. There were observable collusion /S that former director of the F.B.I. and other directors have and have had as a certain type of victim /hyper victim. There's a dozer who's I never had a personal conversation. Shout out to Dozer. In other words, never had a class with him. Their name was repeated to me, and I noted it as the spelling of dossier, but people refer to it as Dozer. And there was a Conrad. I think it was a Conrad Bueller. I never had a class with him either. He's one of the people that walked by me once or twice, involved with former director of the F.B.I., Robert Luskin, and various natures of federal criminals, including ones that his co-defendants, that have collusion /S on and off and between campuses, including with families that forced roles with child abusers, leaders of kids around their own. And as people with the campuses, intercities connected, and intra-cities, and interstates connected, and intrastates, and internationally, but also hyper-internationally. And they don't discern that. They don't discern it. The Old Testament and the Quran were written with consciousness that people wouldn't be able to discern this. And they would stay. in defenses of their difference of fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, self-valued roles, with having been stayed at all ages and natures of campuses, including fire and medical campuses. Timed collusions with the difference of guilt, too. The difference / S of guilt role collusions. Because guilt is an important thing being demonstrated to us that we have to counter, because a human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that nature is showing us is the summary value of those crazy colonial laws and early states laws against every human difference. And helping, even while helping it too, leaving out the breaching methods roles with and use / S of those collusions only allowed. Specifically to have other things and motives, narratives, nature, styles. In the future, in the present, and having been that way, needing to keep a quality of fact, human nature, self-value, tactical, criminal insidiousness nature, with finite details, with grouped, with active relativity, and with increasing value relativity. One identity of value / value progression that we could discern its body of value progression to an extent. It comes also with its complete identity relationship to itself. And the only increasing value of that, 3 ways we could discern to an extent. And use how it is manifest that way to check and to discover things. Have things answered for us by nature itself. Nature itself shows us that relativity / hyperrelativity is something that the ancients appreciated, with syntax appreciating why and how it is functional being, hyper invisible but still discernible, distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. So with the subject, again, it comes with the hyper invisible but still discernible. Or the hyper simultaneous. And that it's as that identity of value progression that is generating the totally different species bodies in our own. And all exception nature come with demonstration of how it is about hyper additional nature and value here, or as a force from here. But I mean value here through its system and uses of words like value. And lethal hadith as force space nature transfer, which is more probably what lethal hadith have been defined as by ancients of ancient pantheism. That a breaching method affected the names of the people of the sciences more and more incapable of affording the words of syntax for and by sciences, or to sciences, to from as with and for sciences, to have it proper. If it had not, that's why part of the reason Black people's rights of eyes has been left out from the subjects of American history, even though it's inseparable from it. And more each day, because James Madison and our founders also communicated about, they left declassified about how the breaching method reassigned with Black people's rights of eyes communicate. They wanted nothing to do with it. All exception nature were forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded because they were internationally monitored conversations, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, at the same time with sense and sensibility, use Johnston's phrase, with styles of logic, needs of logic, natures of logic. No one fathoming. Every instance, originally still, every instance they treat, they have a whole bunch of the retired and standing judges, like with superior courts, like in New York, like in New Jersey. There's a famous song that says, "I'm from MW Jersey, where plenty murders occurs." I don't know who the artist was. It was on a Tupac song. I fought at a Chop World. I fought in Atlantic City one time. through USA Boxing. And they're like, oh, every state, from America to Russia to Ukraine, the suburbs, there were homes that were built before America's founders were born. They didn't have cars. They have cranes. The only reason cars and cranes still building the same. And then the exceptions on the city, people stacking from denatured base. That's not the means by the cranes and things like that. The things that the subject treatments, the nature of debate, things that people aren't following mandated law, they're getting away with it because of how they've been putting collusion self-valued at each age and nature of fact, human nature. And it has self-valued rules with that hyper. Additionally, collusions from off all campuses originally instilled. A breaching method slowly propagated self-valued rules, propagating humanity, what they couldn't fathom. Self-defended roles or sensing for anyone not. Communicating other for what nature communicates here, and with a special difference. America's is our own. Earth's, humanity's, hyper-additionally. One reason our one little species body could get away with being system's tactical terrier from its own, even though we all don't want that too. We have means out of nowhere that come like that. We have means for shock and awe silence, only capable of being to leaders inherited over natures of weapons and natures of industries and natures of existential threats, syntax responses, subject treatments, exceptions that can't defend that and afford the quality of factual nature to be in anyone's mouth, anywhere the species body has a body standing. Short words with convictions proper. Anyone makes a proper description of American history. Since you were little kids, nature itself showed you that there was a human fact, human nature breaching method communicating to you. Because it is forcing that. Nature itself. But a breaching method is also a mimic of nature forcing that. And to be self-valued, right where it's not. And then timed use of it, collusion /S with it too. The collusions part is important because everyone has been screening, not just the breaching method itself, even though it's recorded clear as in day. It's one of the things that those laws were all value at the same time. Again, the timing. There are legal people associated with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices has rules with child abusers, leaders of kids, and people with like Sandy Hook campuses have rules with people that has made confessions regarding how they were going to bring up the price of guns, how the price of guns were going to be brought up, which is also relative because these are people involved with child abusers of kids and with courts with all kinds of evidences racking, stacking predicate acts with facts, also with federal agencies to keep and other countries at the same time. There are people with the name Peruta that when I was a kid and then as an adult, they try to make fake ties, fake nature ties to me and make confessions about themselves being from Russia. As people involved with people from Saudi Arabia, I don't know. And my friend from Saudi Arabia force checked her and persuaded to collusions with them, also with the FBI director and Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, and their lawyer, Robert Chevalier, also with the police chief Cintron and a lawyer of his involved with Russians. Others, I don't know their names. But these are people with fire departments involved with wire crime action methods and police departments involved with such, and fake ties to little kids, fake transcripts on a mass scale These police departments have roles of all natures of organized crimes. And these other agencies, there's a certain type of victim slash hyper victim only allowed to speak for how to respond to things that only allowed to be victims slash hyper victims, though abridged constitutions and other pretended debatable where it is not. Everyone roles, needs, nature, style, sensing for the breach method. Everyone using short words and Devin. Get me off the fake conversations, please, Mr. Grassley with WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. They have the sources of WTNH, people with the name O'Neill, involved intercities with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, and they have their kids involved. Also with the Leahy family. A Leahy family has little kids involved with organized crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders with these O'Neill people, also with a whole bunch of people with whiting forensics, and with the Facebook campuses, the Facebook pages of the campuses, the intelligence community's roles with psychiatry. And as psychiatrists, they're criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot too. We're going to have to address their principles' mistreatments. In other words, beginning with how they have replaced with James Madison and our founders, plural, directed us to communicate for themselves and about how and why. James Madison is the only founder that we know the name of, and about how and why. The plan that they all used was to counter, extort, and force people to break those laws at key locations to an extent. Then they had no means to defend themselves without being a unity. We're all supposed to understand how that unity wasn't directed. Had to hide their actual motivations for becoming that, because they were still internationally monitored conversations. They had still already everyone having had sustained abuses of themselves and others syntactically, therefore physically, also as collusion slash S, but not just with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and those internationally monitored conversations, with formal roles too, no, with slavery, even with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies. They're pretending, they're making debates with people. These campuses are sickly, distinctly criminally foreign influence slash hyper criminally foreign influence too. They have people that weren't even in the same classes together. And exceptions like Anthony Agman. He's on Facebook. He's involved with there are a whole bunch of people like my English teachers and other teachers I had as grouped uses of them, where they're putting fake things in databases. And they're making the victim teachers collusion slash S. Some of them are making them victim predators collusion. Like Miss Baldi. And Anthony Agman has roles. Then he's like trying to talk to them. He never, him, a Mike DeMaine, and they put the Congressman Larson's son, and we were the 4 people in the class. And there was a Miss Riley with some Jewish themes, and she repeated something sexual about my neighbor, a little girl. I never met her in my life, never even saw her, what she looks like. And that's increasingly having been brought up. Mike DeMaine has the FBI director, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members have collusions with people all on Hangdog Lane and 2-Rod Highway, with people next to Fox Connecticut News, next to WTNH, next to, which is also the FBI there, They have wire crime maxim methods. They have defenses of their identity, their difference, tactical terror from, properly. These are victims as A through Z slash hyper victims, but they want to have debate. Oh, you're saying something bad. They're changing and faking what we say, and on an extent, they're worse than criminal incompetence with the black pupils' whites of eyes. So we have to just speak about the actual predicate acts impact and predicate acts methods impact, though, because the methods coincide with the method, the breaching method, a singular, hyper singular breaching method that has everyone. Replacing what our founders and what nature communicates about it. So there's sequence shifts and measuring and sensing for the hyper foreign that used our F.B.I. remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. They have collusions with Connecticut networks and the names next to them. and all sides of criminal and civil cases. Their sources, names at crime scenes next to them, the news at the same time, interbranch families, the intelligence tied to them, foreign and domestic intelligence, they'd be mixed. The interbranch families are extended family members. They have roles with the spots next to campuses. Like fire departments too, even rolls all kinds of fake news too. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and their wire crime acts and methods. They have Afghan leaders and their kids involved with sequence shifts, identity thefts, frauds, wire crimes, and confessions about their roles with Los Solitos and the Wethersfield town offices, with this police department, this police chief Cintron one years ago, whole bunch of people. So anyway, please don't fall for it, Americans. I'm not a licensed journalist. Journalists stole my identity. Even timed collusions with the social media that were whiting forensics and the Facebook pages of the campuses. Facebook has personal and professional roles with the agencies, with sexual and medical offenders of kids at courts and medical and principal child abusers campus, who had roles with it with families that had already been involved with ones years apart, child abusers, leaders of kids, and people next to the religious spots, the same ones, time collusions with untimely deaths and murders intercities. One of them was on the campus of Trinity College. Even if that was made up, it was involved with them with predicate acts with the FBI director, Robert Luskin. There's a Joshua Stryker who was brought up by confessions of people increasingly tied to child abusers, leaders of kids, with their educators, involved with the corner of Griswold Street and Fairlane Drive, Jeremy Grohl and others, Subby Bajario. They have roles with Joshua Stryker in Wethersfield. I don't know where he lives. And he has roles with them next to Trinity College with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Paul Zano sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He had roles planting evidences at Trinity College with people named Puzo and all along Route 3 and on New Britain Avenue. Also with people all along Route 3 and conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices. These are also people with the branches of the government individually grouped and together, being and having been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. So please get them on paper, one name and sequence. Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and now as an adult. Fox News is hiding this from Judge Napolitano and or with him, but I doubt it. And all exceptions to that, in other words. Please do what's right, Judge Napolitano, because I've been asking you guys for a lot of years now on the line, because they use wire crime acts and methods and falsified transcripts and faked. They already faked ties to me at campuses filmed 24/7 with the people before the World Trade Center attack involved with the FBI and the Britain Superior Court and Harper Courts and their family members and intimate ties with the Eric Burgess and Emily or Amy. And Eric Burgess' request for help, and then said, I don't know if it was, I had a conversation with him, Dean Judd and his kid. Someone they said was his kid, was planting evidences with foreign and domestic military, fake motivations for it, sequence shifts, fake ties, fake nature of ties to me, with people intercities involved with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. From Wethersfield also confessed uses of the same location /S. And there's a reported serial killer involved with that location. And that serial killer, it was made up and they had him undercover or whatever in Sandy Hook prison. That guy is involved with the courts and the people with Sandy Hook prison and their campuses and their family members, intimate ties, sexual circles involved with the intelligence communities and ones associated with them on the sides of Central Connecticut State University. Since before I went there, increasingly intelligence families from Wethersfield have collusion /S, intercities and intra-cities, putting fake acting tied to it, putting fake transcripts enacting time to it, collusion/S, with a whole bunch of different countries and agencies and their family members, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. At the same time, collusions with cover-ups with of past collusions with uses of differences, like their age difference, where we have collusions with, even when they're not in the same cases. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, planting evidence in sequence shifts, because they're showing these, they're just all styles of logic, needs, natures of logic, reliant upon fact, human nature, quality, aspects, nature, principle treatments that wouldn't be able to defend themselves had American history been taught properly about James Madison's plan. Why and how really the Declaration of Independence unfolded. Because George Washington counter-extorted everyone. From inside, they're tortured, extorted, and enslaved positions to an extent. We have not completed the getting the Constitution unabridged, because we have not completed getting subject treatments legitimate. People say take an oath, or I take an oath to the Constitution. They know the Constitution is already written criminally for influence, tactically delusions, rot, the readings of it. Otherwise, exception, nature itself would have showed us this. They can't defend how they interpreted the law and appreciated their forced roles with instances descriptions, including crimes, but all the opposites too, because this kid needs them to hide what it's doing, which is keeping everyone getting over on the hyper simultaneous. That's why nature loves the simultaneous. That's why it loves not the finite details to be let out. When we're supposed to be discerned when we're using systems individually grouped or together. Tactical ulterior from, let alone tactical ulterior from the hypernative system. Please, Chuck Grassley. I'll help you from here. In other words, let's get them onto paper, one name and sequence. A whole bunch of people sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. Even though I didn't use his name, they have been influenced from people from Wethersfield campuses, and their educators have been involved with, from off campuses, influenced, repeat fake things. And their and roles with acting type to where they use the right to lie, where they don't have the right to lie, where they have the right to be unmarked police forms, where they don't have the right to be unmarked police forms. They have collusions with World Trade Center predicate acts, increasingly through all kinds of other stuff. I never saw, in other words, so let's get them on paper, because then they play games, allegations. They're all day they're making allegations, and then when people want to speak about acts, they're pretending we're making allegations against people, because they have roles. A bunch of people next to the networks, including Fox News. Please, Fox News and Chuck Grassley, get Thaddeus Grabowski. People tied to Thaddeus Grabowski, timed when he, in 2006, are increasingly before and after the World Trade Center attack, involved with 2 Route Highway, where it runs into Hangdog Lane, with a bunch of courts of family members and a bunch of journalists and people tied to them with overt criminal enterprises, private ones in a bunch of countries, and people tied to body dumping spots, and as ones involved with multiple child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, and the families involved with that. Involved also with the news with identity theft, fraud, slingers at the same time. Bunch of fakes are shown by the breaching method that there were a certain type of victim / hyper victim that valued how a breaching method showed them how to speak for the laws and readings of principles and reason and morality. That's debatable. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. In other words, please.